For this video, I will be showing you how to program in Bolt, which is the graphical programming language that Unity has. If you go ahead and search inside the Unity Asset Store, you can find Bolt. So just search up Bolt, go to free, because it is free. You should see something that looks like this. Not grayed out. I've already quote-unquote purchased it, so mine's grayed out, but yours should not be grayed out like this. It should just look like any of these ones. Go ahead and click on it, and you can go ahead and grab it from here. Once you've quote-unquote purchased it, we can go ahead and open it in Unity. Either have Unity open, and you can go to the package manager, or you can go ahead and just hit this to go ahead and open it into Unity. So you're going to need to go ahead and search up Bolt and find it inside your assets. Once you've found it, go ahead and download it and import it. Do the same process that we had last time. Once Bolt has been successfully installed, it should show like this. Go ahead and select Next, and you can choose either to go for the programmer naming or human naming conventions. For this tutorial, I will be using the programmer naming, since that's what I'm more used to. For anyone who wants to maybe move on to using scripting, the programmer naming is a good way to get sort of your head around the naming conventions and how things will look when they're actually just typed out rather than inside this graphical format. The human naming might make a little bit more sense for people who don't understand the sort of programmer naming conventions. For instance, we have this transform get position rather than transform.position get. Or we have list of game objects rather than list and then what it is of. Small things like that. I would recommend you select programmer naming if you're following along with this, and some of the parts have quite different names, and it might be difficult to find the same one if you're looking at the human naming side. For these assembly options, for right now, we don't have to do anything. For the AR version, we will have to add a new assembly, be the XR assembly. But I will show you how to do that when I show you how to create the Bolt's AR script. Now you can see what types you want to use for here. Here you can also actually start to mess around with things. I'd recommend just leaving these all alone and hitting generate. Now that we've installed Bolt and it's been successfully set up, we can go ahead and close the Bolt setup wizard and the project manager, as we won't need those for the rest of this video. Okay, now that we have everything installed, let's give our scene some movement. As you can see, the Create menu, when you right-click in the Assets area, now has a new Bolt option. We are going to want to create a flow macro. State macros are an implementation of a finite state machine. They're really good for more high-level things, like saying, I'm in this state and this thing is happening, so I want to move to this state where I do this other thing. It might be useful for some of you that have multiple scenes. The other one, the flow macro, which is the much more common one that you're going to be wanting to work with, work pretty much like a scripted program. You have something that starts the flow, and then each part of the flow runs in sequence. So we're going to create one of those. Let's give it a name, and for the first one, let's make this cube spin. So let's call this a cube. Now that we've named it, we can go ahead and click Edit Graph. This is going to pop up, which is the Bolt graph editor. You can right-click in this window to start creating the graph. In this case, what we're going to do is have the start of the flow be an update, which effectively, what the update thing does is it is an event which happens on every frame. So every frame that your program runs, it will run whatever is this way of that update. The next thing that we're going to want to do is go ahead and start the flow. So we drag out this, which is the flow, and it'll allow us to add something else. In this case, we want to go ahead and rotate it. So let's just search up rotate, and you can see there's this, there's a couple different options for rotate. Let's use the Euler's relative to. See that places there. It's got the flow going into it. It already selects itself, which means that it will just rotate whatever it is attached to, whatever this script is attached to. So all we need to do is change one of these to a number, set it relative to itself, which means that it'll rotate to a Euler of 1 degrees x relative to where itself is pointing, rather than the world. If it's the world, it will just sort of move to that point and then stick there, because the world's 1 is always there. While if you rotate it to the 1 and then check itself, the 1 is always going to be a little bit farther along, as you're always changing its own position. And that's all you need to do for that. Give it a name, like rotate cube, and we can go ahead and move this flow graph off to the side. If you want to, you can stick the flow graph here. Would be useful. I usually tend to just have it detached, like it is here, and keep this here. And then just move it off the screen for when I'm not using it. If you remember, we have a cube already in the scene, over here, which has some physics stuff on it. So it will move around in a nice way. So let's go ahead and we can add a component. Bolt. We want to add a flow machine. Now that we've added a flow machine, we press the little button to bring it down. You can see that it wants a couple things. It also has added a variables thing in case we had any variables that we needed to pull in. But it wants a macro, which is the thing that we just created. So we can go ahead and grab that from your assets, drag it over, and just drop it into there. Now, if you hit play, it should work. And we can see that it is working. And if you look at the graph, you can see that the update is constantly flowing in and triggering this rotate. Much faster than those dots. They're not in any way relating to it, but it's showing you that it is actually doing that. And you can edit this in real time because Bolt is nice like that. So for instance, we could go ahead and put a 1 on there, and then it's going to start doing some weird jumping around things as it rotates in 2 directions. We could also even go ahead and look at one of these palm trees and go ahead and add one of these to it as we're running. Anything done while you're running, anything done while it's running will not affect the scene once you stop it running. So if you wanted this to be permanent, you would have to stop it running, add in the flow machine, and then set it running again. Of course, that is the wrong way for that tree to be spinning. Granted, most trees don't spin, so let's go ahead and correct that. We can pull this in. We can go ahead and stop that spinning like that, start it spinning like that. That's the correct direction for it to be spinning. It's now on an angle, and yeah. You also saw that as we stopped it spinning and started it spinning in the other direction, the cube also ran off the side. That's because we only have one of these, and so it was editing it for both the version on the tree and the version on the cube. If you had created a second one to put on the tree, then they wouldn't have clashed. If we go ahead and hit play again, you'll see that the tree does not start spinning, because that was only in the plane. Let's make something a little bit more useful, something that might have a little bit more utility for all of you. Let's make one of these trees turn invisible. So let's hit a create and go to bolt. Go ahead and create another float macro. Let's name it. You can see it's hidden behind there, but you can just type into it tree disabler. You can see that this flow graph has automatically swapped to it. Then we'll call it a tree. So in this case, what we're going to do is we are going to get a key press. So if you search it up, you can find that there is a input get key. And let's go down and let's get a key down. This is when a key is pressed. Now this needs to have something to tell it when to check whether that key is down. So let's use the update. Again, just like last time. Just drag that into there. And now we're flowing into here. The key, let's put it as a space. Sounds good. Okay, so we want to go ahead and disable this tree, or rather make it invisible. So we can take the flow from here, and what we're going to want to do is check if that key has been pressed. So you do control and branch, and bring this into here. And now we have a nice little way of checking. So the true branch will be triggered if the key is down, and the false branch will be triggered if it isn't. So when the key is down, what we want to do is we want to disable, as I have hinted to before. That disabling will make it invisible. So what we can do in order to get that is we go game object, and anything in the scene is a game object dot set active, which you can see up at the top here. Click on that, and now we have a nice little thing. Now it wants a couple different things. It wants a game object, and it wants a value of what to set up. Now in that case, for the value, that's pretty easy. It's true or false. So what we should do is create a new one, which is new little variable. We'll call it isActive. We'll make it into a Boolean, which you can see is purple or pink, as is all of those ones, as it is just a true or false. We'll start it off as active because the tree will be visible to start off. And then we can go ahead and drag that from here into here, and now we have the get. Now that we have that variable, we don't want to set it to the isActive, since that's just going to set it to itself. So we're going to go ahead and not this variable, which in terms of Booleans, which are always either true or false, think of them as yes or no, notting one or negating one just flips it. So if it is true, then it turns it to false. If it is false, then it turns it to true. This is in the logic section. Go ahead and add the negate, and we can go ahead and stick that into here. Now that we have it grabbing it from this variable, negating it and putting it in, we need to make sure that we also set that variable to be what it is currently. So we can go ahead and drag out the flow. We want to go set variable. So let's set a graph variable, which is to say here. And we can pull in go isActive. You can go ahead and pull in this one because that is what it is going to be. You can set that variable. There we go. Now this other option that it wants, this, is the game object that it wants to disable or enable. Now last time we just let it use itself, which was fine because that was just rotating. In this case, if it sets it to inactive, then it's not active, so it's not going to be looking for the spacebar in order to reactivate itself. So in that case, what we're going to need to do is go ahead and attach it to something else. So let's go back to the scene. Bolt has done something quite nice for us and created this empty game object which has some scene variables. Scene variables are useful if you have a couple of different variables that you want to be able to go into multiple different flow graphs. What we're going to use is just the empty game object. We're going to add a flow machine onto here, and we're going to toss that tree disabler into here. We don't want to just disable the scene variables because that's invisible anyway. There's no model attached to it. So what we're going to do is add a new variable. Let's call this the tree. And this variable is going to be a game object. And now, if we scroll over to here, you can see our script, our tree disabler script. And we can pull this tree variable from the scene variables area over here and drop it onto this graph. Now let's go ahead and toss this up into here, and now we've got all of that. Of course, it's going to be targeting something called none, which means there's going to be an error. Let's choose one of these trees to make invisible. Let's say that one that we were going to be spinning earlier. And we can come back here, grab that tree, drag it over to... Sorry, you have to make this a game object. Occasionally they revert back to if you haven't set the value because there is no value, so it doesn't have anything to save it with. And we can drag from that tree over to here and drop it in. Now we can see that, see all this. Let's go ahead and move this down here so that you can see it while this happens. You can hit play. So you can see on here, the update is flowing into this. It's getting it, and it's saying that this is false. And it's flowing into the next, into the branch. Of course it's false, so it's going through this branch, which doesn't do anything. If, however, we press space, it's going to turn true for a second. Now that true is way too fast for anybody to see. But what happens when the true happens is this flows into here. This thing goes, oh, I need this object, right? Let's grab that. And you can see it grabs the Fey Palm C, which is the one that's turned invisible now. It also says, oh, I need this. Let's go look. Oh, we want this. Okay, that's true. So now it's false. And then it flows to here. And this one goes, oh, I need this. Right, that's false. And it flows. So if we look at the actual scene itself, we can see that the tree can appear and disappear whenever I press space. Which can be very useful if you have multiple scenes or you have something that you don't want to be around anymore after something happens. You can just go ahead and disable it, and it'll just turn it off visually. It'll turn off all scripts related to it. It'll turn off all animations, everything. Now let's go ahead and make one more script. This script is going to be, much like the others, a flow macro. This time we are going to name it Water Maker, and we're going to make a very crude form of water and spray it all over this scene. So in most computer graphics, water is basically just a bunch of little tiny balls, and then they use some fancy math and computer stuff to make it look like water, which is why simulated water often has a weird gloopy effect, because it's actually just these little tiny balls that are rolling around on top of each other. But we're going to make that, except without all the math and computer stuff. So it's just going to be a bunch of balls. Now, in order to make this, we could just go ahead and right-click here, go 3D object, create a sphere, move it into place. Make it nice and small. Add a rigid body so that it has some physics. Maybe make its mass a little bit less. Maybe give it a cool new material. Go ahead and drag it onto there. Definitely doesn't look at water like water at this point, but use your imagination. Yeah, we could take that orb that we just made and go ahead and copy and paste that a bunch of times. But that would get boring real fast. So instead, let's not do that. Let's make a prefab, like how I showed you in the AR video. You're going to take it from here, and drag it down into the assets area, and you're going to drop it. There we go. We now have the sphere prefab. We can delete the one inside the scene. The other thing we're going to do is make a spout where all the water is going to come from. Let's go ahead and just create an empty object. Let's call this the spout. And then let's just move this so that it is just like hanging out above these trees. The water has a little bit ways to fall. There we go. Yep, that sounds good. Yeah. And we can go ahead and create this water maker. We have a few different things. So, or to start this, so we can go ahead and create this water maker script. Let's start actually by first adding this water maker to this object. The water maker. And it's going to make water. So, you can see here I swapped two object variables because it's part of an object. That's these variables up here, like how I did it inside the scene variables. Those will show up here, so it'll be easier to grab things from the scene and place them in. We're going to want this to trigger on the update again, so you all know the drill. So for this water maker, we're going to want to slow down how often it triggers. Like, we don't want it to trigger every single frame. That's just going to create way too many spheres. So, when we want to do that sort of thing, we can just use the cooldown method. So cooldown method looks a little bit complicated, but all you really have to know is this here is the duration. So how long between dropping water. In this case, I'm just going to put down to 0.5. Then we can go ahead and we can grab this ready, which is what happens when the cooldown goes off cooldown. And when that happens, we can instantiate. We can go ahead and instantiate, which is one of these. Now, instantiating is effectively creating a new version of an object from a prefab. So, in this case, we're going to use one of these. So, now that we have an instantiate object, we need to give it the original object that we want to create a copy of, the position that we want it to place it, and the rotation that it should have. Of course, it's a ball, so rotation doesn't really matter, but we do need to give it something. So what we're going to want to do is we want to add in the spout. We want to give the spout the spout. Drag that in. There we go. And now the spout variable with the spout game object inside it is going to be used for both the position and rotation of the newly spawned balls. Getting the original is not that hard either. We can do that without this. We need to make a new variable, which we'll call ball prefab. So this water ball prefab is a game object, and we can go ahead and grab the water ball, which down here is called the sphere, drag it up, see, that was the one that we created earlier, and drop it into there. Come back over here, and we can drag it in to get that, and drop it into the original. So, quick correction, I made a mistake when I connected this get variable to the position and rotation here. Shouldn't be connected directly to it, since this is a game object, and what it wants is a position and rotation. So we can fix that by just grabbing the transform and exposing it, which gives you all the numbers you would ever need. And we can grab the position from here, drag it up to the position here, and the rotation from here, and drag it up to the rotation here. And now, that should function as I wanted it to. You can see, it's dropping new balls onto there. And it looks like they are all landing precisely on top of each other. Which means they will never stop. If we want to have them roll around a little, what we could do is move the spout to be maybe on top of this cube. It'll drop onto something that's moving a little. Yeah, there we go. I have some balls rolling around. Of course, as you can see whenever the cooldown triggers, you can see those little things run in and instantiate one of them. This happens every half second. You can, of course, have this happening faster. Looks like it's accidentally fallen into rhythm again. Yeah. You can also spawn things that don't have physics on them. You can spawn them once. You can do all kinds of things with instantiate. It's very useful. Yeah, that's the finish of the bolt tutorial video. Next one, I believe, will be showing you how to make something appear in an AR space. If you have any issues with bolts, let me know on the Discord and I can help you.